So I sawed off this cake server from an old, I don't think it's silver, I think it's epiphanies, but it's still pretty, cake server that had belonged to my mother and I haven't used in years, and I've got a gold plated one, so if I want to use a cake server I've still got a nice piece, and you can't make jewellery out of the gold plating because it just peels off. So I'm making stuff out of the silver, the remnants of my mother's silver. The last of my inheritance, the last hurrah, right? And I wrote on the the bling group, the group that I'm in, that are teaching me how to make things and guiding me, and the people on there have been so generous with their knowledge and sharing of tips, and they're just wonderful, lovely people. I'm so blessed. And it came to me because I cut this piece out of the back end of the server. That's the piece I cut it from, to make a forked tongue. And it's funny because I put a prayer out to the multiverses to help me prosper and by my own talents or by my own abilities in some small way, or however it manifests. And I knitted about 20 fairies in the last few years, and I didn't sell one of them, just gave them away as gifts, which is lovely, because they make lovely gifts. And some were so vastly unappreciated that I ended the friendships with those people because I just thought that was just callow and awful. And others are dearly cherished and beloved, little knitted objects from the fairy realm and from the Tanya, sitting on people's, furniture and reminding them of the whimsy that is life and magic and mystery and the whimsy of the Tanya, right? Dear friends who actually cherish my workmanship and efforts I put into things, because sometimes I stumble around in the dark feeling hopeless and helpless and very much still suffering from complex PTSD from my abusive childhood and marriage. So anyway, I digress. So I'm grinding this fork that I cut off, this forked tongue. And I was smiling to myself because I actually wrote, it was a bit almost borderline really, I'm not a borderline, but it was a kind of a borderline tray thing to do. I wrote into the group that I come from a very, very abusive family, and that my mother always spoke with a forked tongue, and that, basically using the snake analogy. And this was before I decided to turn this beautiful piece into a snake bangle. I hope it turns out, because I'm new at this and I'm not very good at it. And anyway, so I cut out the tongue piece this morning because I hadn't yet decided if I was definitely going to turn this into a snake, because I also see vaguely potential for it to be an angel, or there's sort of a vague, pattern there. It could have been an angel or person if I tweaked it a bit. But then I like the idea of it being a snake and lying across the hand like this, I've got to curve it. So I liked the idea, and I thought, well, the amount of workmanship I have to put into it, and it's only EPNS, it's not real silver, so I won't get much money for it anyway. So I've decided to make it for myself and wear it, and it can be kind of an advertisement and a reminder of my first piece. Although this is actually my first piece, which I stuffed up epically, but I've rescued it by pounding it, and it's going to be an octopus. So I'm just waiting for some rivets to arrive to give it eyes, and I also have to drill a little jump ring. But that was my very first piece, and this is the ring that I'm going to make from the other end of that fork. And I'm stuck because I can't afford the ring bender, and that one's quite thick and I'm having trouble. So anyway, having said that, I bought the vice grip yesterday. I might have a go at that ring later and try with the vice grip again. But anyway, so okay, technically this is my second piece. So where was I going with this? Oh yes, so I cut this out, and as you can see, I cut it with my Dremel here, which was quite audacious. and I was scared because I've never cut anything with the Dremel piece before, and I'm cutting into it, and I go into these little sometimes musings or mindfulness type. I get into this zone, and I'm trying to grind it into shape because it ended up a bit wonky, so I'm carefully grinding it, and then it was like this flash. I thought, yes, there's a few scratch marks. I'm going to have to try and get those off. Far out. But anyway, I had this flash of my father-in-law, Harry Aarons, Herschel Aronchik. Herschel, no, how was it? Yes, it was. It was his Hebrew name was Herschel Ben Zvi Hirsch, my father-in-law. Now, he was only in my life for about, well, I sort of met him, when I briefly went after I met my husband, so probably about 2 years. But we didn't form a bond or a strong relationship till I got engaged to Michael. And then he was only in my life for 8 months, and then he died very suddenly and very rapidly from bowel and stomach cancers. Now, Harry Aarons. Let me tell you about Harry Aarons. He had been a bit of a shit to his wife, Hilda. Like, they stayed married for 46 years, but I don't think there was much love lost really at the end. She literally bloomed after he died, got pink cheeks, and was really starting to thrive. And so it's a shame that she only lived for 4 years after he passed away. He passed away on the 18th of May 1984, 2 nights before my wedding. So, yes, I had an awful wedding, very traumatised, grief-stricken wedding. And we went ahead with it because Harry had wanted it so badly. He had flown me to Melbourne to do my Jewish conversion, hoping that I would be converted and ready to get married in time before he died. But it was the counting of the Omer. So we had to wait till Lag BaOmer, which fell on the 20th of May 1984, to get married, because marriages and festivities are forbidden during the 40 days of counting of the Omer. So, and as fate would have it, Harry died 2 nights before that. So there was no way we could have brought the wedding forward, or there was nothing we could do. So it was very tragic, and it set in motion, really. It was just more added cumulative trauma to add to my already existent trauma. Now, Harry Aarons loved me. He didn't love me in the beginning. He was a bit suspicious of me. But I had met him as a young girl, a teenage girl, about 2 years before I even met his son. His son was actually introduced to me by family friends via my mother. So it was actually kind of an arranged meeting, an arranged blind date, and it was kind of an arranged, yes. I was basically forced out into marriage very young. And I was naively thinking that I was intelligent and I was at university and the world was at my feet and that I'd have this wonderful life. And for a few years I had a nice enough life, and I had children, and that was my greatest joy, actually, my babies. And then things slowly started to deteriorate. Mainly my mental health was triggered by family viciousness on all sides, my own family of origin, and Michael's sister and brother-in-law, and my mother-in-law becoming more and more borderline and splitting and malicious. I think in her own way she did love me though, but she just, she had a severe mental health problem, and I fell prey to that. So there is that. But anyway, once again I digress. So I'm grinding into this fork tongue, not thinking particularly anything, and this flash came to my mind, and it was Harry Aarons. Herschel Ben Zvi Hirsch. And in the flash of memory, he reminded me that later on in his life, I think he started in his 40s or late 30s, I don't know how old he was, he had trained as a furrier back in Poland, and he made good money making fur coats and stoles and things out of fur. But later in his life, he had gone into working with metal. And he became a fabricated furniture manufacturer. I think he had a partner. I don't remember who the partners was. But he made tubular furniture, and he made them in the Art Deco style. You know, with like nudes holding up tables and lamp bases and things like that. And he actually fabricated them from his own designs. I think, to be honest, Hilda might have helped design some of them, because she designed the most beautiful Art Deco mirror that they had. Now all this got sold off by the malevolent and greedy Shirley, Jacques and Bill and Michael when they died, and it's actually quite awful because some of those pieces were spectacular and should have been kept in the family, but all they cared about, because they were just the most materialistic and vile verminous creatures, they didn't care about art or beauty. All they cared about was cold, hard cash. So they sold the lot, and there's nothing more to show of it. But anyway, I have the memory of the most fabulous furniture that Harry made in his factory. He made a lot of money from it, became quite wealthy, I believe. Now, Harry had wanted to protect me financially. And before he died, I'm told he insisted that Michael's townhouse, that of course I lived in with him, shared with him as his wife, was paid for, had no mortgage. He insisted that I had a freehold home. And I also remember him being very angry and frustrated with Michael in his very drugged out state with morphine. When he was dying, he actually called out, "Stop it, Michael," and we all looked at each other, because poor Michael, to be fair, had been sitting there grieving and hadn't said or done anything. So I think in some ways Mr. Aarons, Harry Aarons, knew that his son was a bit of a schmendrick and a schmuck, and would probably do me no good at all in the long run. But I guess he thought, well, love would conquer all, and I was so sweet and loving as a young girl, and so romantic and idealistic and naive, that I thought love would be enough. And I didn't even comprehend, as a young wife and a young mother even, it took me around about till the age of 28, when the pennies started dropping left, right and centre, that I wasn't really loved or protected or being nurtured at all, and was just a convenience and a trophy of something. But then I wasn't even cherished, so I was hardly a trophy. Anyway, I started to realise, and it was about then that my depression became worse and my marriage unravelled. So by the time I was 20, just shy of 30 actually, 29 3/4, I left the marriage. And I felt incredibly guilty and ashamed about not leaving my marriage. I mean, I had to survive, and hoping to give my children a better life, which didn't pan out. But I left hoping that I would have a better, more harmonious, peaceful life. Well, that didn't pan out. I was under full-blown vicious attack, to the point I was almost murdered several times. The first being 2 weeks after I left the marriage, just before the age of 30. So, but I harboured this guilt towards Harry Aarons for so many years, because I knew he had wanted me to prosper and he had wanted me to have a freehold house. So by 23, when we migrated here to Brisbane, my mother-in-law died 9 days after we arrived here. And so as a consequence of that, yet again, I had a freehold house, a bigger, nicer house, but freehold, no mortgage. So you see how the universe, when I was a young woman, was determined through inheritance, through the loss of family that were actually, had been kind to me, unlike my own family of origin. They had largely been kinder to me, certainly through Harry's influence. And I had been gifted not one but two freehold houses, and should have been, by all accounts, wealthy by my age and stage of life now, had I not had no choice but to leave that awful marriage and been divested of all wealth and property and assets and my sanity because of the vicious attacks on my life and the threats against me and my children that were continuous. It was enough to drive one to suicide, and I came close to it a few times. The only thing that kept me going initially when my kids were young was I felt this deep responsibility to ensure that I got them to adulthood so they had a chance at being mothers themselves and having their own families one day and completing the cycle of life, right? It's the human condition. We're programmed to think that way. So anyway, I'm sitting here and having flashbacks of Harry Aarons and him showing me his tubular furniture that he built when he was older and took great pride in that. And then I realised I'm working with metal, EPNS silver, and if I can get enough money, real sterling silver, and I want to become a silversmith. And it hit me, it was like he was saying, yes, I approve, because I too, in late stage in my life, worked with metal and I enjoyed it and I prospered by it. And so and then I was reminded too that since, when did I stop going to ecstatic dance? Last September. So it was November the year before, in 2019. While I was in trance dance at ecstatic dance, which was something I very much enjoyed, and it's a shame it's been sullied and ruined for me by people who were shallow and callow and spiteful, because I did enjoy it, but I refused to put myself in situations where people treat me with disrespect and dishonour and like I'm some sort of low grade fucking idiot, because I don't deserve to be treated like that, because I'm a wonderful person and I deserve all the good things in this life, even though I have anger issues and I rant and rave on Facebook from time to time about various identities that have been cruel to me. So I'm not perfect. I'm still very, very subject to my own suffering and judgments, I suppose. But in the ecstatic dance, trance dancing, I was shown, November 2019, I was shown various symbols of alchemy. And I remember thinking, I don't know much about alchemy. What on earth is Spirit trying to show me? And the two symbols, one was lead and one was tin. And one represented Saturn and one, I think, represents Neptune, if I remember correctly. And I wrote it all down because I thought, what on earth, how does this relate to my life? At that time it made no sense at all. But here I am, sawing down electroplated silver pieces made from nickel, which I think nickel is made from tin and something else. So there you go. The alchemy symbols that I was shown by Spirit are starting to also fall into place. But having my father-in-law of blessed memory come to mind while I was cutting out and grinding this forked tongue, that brought a smile to my face, because although he was only in my life for a very short time, I know with every fibre of my being that he was on my side, and he was the closest thing to a father figure I'd ever had. I had a lot of fathers growing up. I had my own biological father. I had Cornelis Case van der Graft as a de facto stepfather from the age of 9. I had my godfather from birth, and they were all predators. I mean, my father didn't sexually predate on me as a child, but he did when I was 20 and heavily pregnant with my daughter. So it's just filthy and disgusting and degrading, but these were the men that were meant to nurture and support and protect and guide me, and they failed. They failed stupendously with their sexual abuse and their disrespect and dishonour and predation. So when I met Harry Aarons, I met him because I had fallen off my horse. I was 15. I had that horse from the ages of 14 till 23. I sold her just before I came to Australia. I had fallen off my horse, and I was lying down in the it was actually in a football field, so it was a bit naughty of me digging up their football field, but what can I say? I didn't like men much, and that was my little bit of revenge on manhood, you know, let them stumble and fall like they did to me all my life. And it was wrong of me, and I'm sorry for that, you know. But honestly, a little girl has to get whatever little bit of satisfaction she can get. And that was my one small rebellion. Most of my other friends were on drugs, writing themselves off, and I'm digging up holes in football fields with horse hooves. So really, come on, it was a mild infraction. But I am sorry for the possible broken ankles or the time it took the greenskeeper to flatten down the little tufts again. Anyway, I had fallen off my horse because my horse, who was really only a small pony, was a bit wild. She'd never been broken formally. So we'd be cantering across this field, and she would put her head down, right down, mid-canter, and I would go flying over the top of her neck, over her head, somersaulting, and I was very lucky. I knew that I had to relax whenever I fell off her to avoid an injury. So I would think, well, here we go, I'm flying again. And I would go careening over this frickin' little mare, little bitch she was, much as I loved her. And I would land flat on my back. And I would just go like rubber and just lie there. So I was lying there. And the football field was across the road from my father-in-law to be's house, and I didn't know them at that time. And I remember I was lying there, and this elderly gentleman appeared. He'd run over from across the road, and he'd run over to me, and in his still very strong Polish accent, and he came out to New Zealand in 1931. Actually, no, he came out, I think, in 1929, and Hilda followed him out in 1931, and they married. So they escaped the Holocaust, but he never lost his strong Polish accent. So Harry's standing beside me, and I open my eyes, and I see this elderly gentleman looking down, bending over me, peering down at me. Now, with my history of child sexual abuse, all I could think of is, oh, dear God, not another one leering over me when I'm vulnerable. So I closed my eyes again and hoped he would go away. And he said in a strong Polish accent, "Are you all right, dear?" And I replied, no. I said, no. I think I might be dead and you might be an angel. Words to that effect. And he laughed and he said, no, you're not dead. if you can answer me, you're not dead. He said, have you broken anything? And I lay there and I said, looked up at him and I said, well, while I've been lying here so long, I said, I'm checking through all my joints and bones to see if there's anything broken, but I don't have any pain. And I broke my wrist when I was 7, so I know what that pain feels like. So believe me, nothing is broken. But I'm just going to lie here a little bit because it feels nice and comforting. And anyway, he was greatly amused by this. So anyway, he helped me up. And he said, I live in the house across the road. And he says, I often see you riding your horse here. He said, but he says, tell me, I don't understand it. He said, why do you lead her by the halter? He said, always you go in one direction and you lead her by the halter. And then you come riding her back. And I said, because my horse is wild and she won't let me ride her when her nose is pointed away from home. So I drag her around like a dog to the beach and I let her roll around in the sand and play in the beach. And then she permits me to ride her back to the paddock. And I said, what can I say? She's her own, she's her own person. She's her own animal. She knows what she wants. And who am I to tell her otherwise? He found this very amusing. Anyway, he was very kind. And I thanked him for coming to check on me. Because I said I could have been very badly hurt, but I'm not because I know how to fall. I said my only worry is if I hit my head on a rock or something. And so he chastised me because I didn't wear a riding helmet because I was a bit wild too. And I think secretly, even as a teenager, I was hoping I might actually die to avoid any further abuses from my family. And for some capricious and mischievous and miraculous and unknowable reason, the gods kept saving me and keeping me alive, even in recent memory against my better judgment. So there is that. So he chastised me about not wearing a helmet, rightfully so. And he also chastised me about riding my darn horse on the football field because it was very selfish and rude of me. And I agreed. I said, yes, but I hate all men, so I want my revenge. And he laughed. He did kind of laugh at that. So that was our first meeting, right? And then the next time I met him, I had already been dating his son for about 6 months or so, 3 to 6 months. And because I was really a teenager playing grown-ups and my mother had groomed me to dress like a 40-year-old courtesan in the hope of marrying me off young so she could be divested of any responsibility of raising me, because she really was a bastard. She really was a bastard to do that to me, given my trauma issues in my life. I deserved better than that, really. But no one intervened and told me otherwise. They just let me all go along with the flow. So what happened was, about to lose power, eek. So what happened then was, when I met my father-in-law for the first time as a slightly older teenager, 17, just over 17, 17 and a half I would have been. What happened was, why is that not working? Heavens to that Murgatroyd. What happened was I was wearing the most fabulous black velvet mini dress. Now the mini dress was quite old, it came from the 60s. So it was a genuine mini dress. But it was the most beautiful black velvet dress. Why is this not charging? In a sec.